How's everyone doing this evening? This is Ray Roberts here, coming out of Kenosha, and just we're gonna do a little bit of rambling tonight about everything and nothing, like we usually do. So tonight's topics here is we're going to engage on. There's three big topics, although it's always about community connection, local unrest, how we got here, what are we going to do to possibly present it. So those are always the basically underlying or foundational topics here. Um, but what the three things I'd like to kind of move around today is the ideas of the following. First, Kenosha's 5 minutes of fame. Okay, so since Kenosha has this opportunity here, what do you do with it? And almost as important, what do you not do when you have your 5 minutes of fame? So I'd like to talk about that. Next, I've been watching some chatter online, so I saw something that I kind of was interested to see what people have to talk about in the community, where people are noticing, and actually I'm watching organic conversation regarding co-parenting situations. So the co-parenting of biracial children and the effects of both parents not being in the picture, especially during this civil unrest time, and even further, people noticing parents raising biracial children with a clear tone deafness to what's occurring right now in our nation, in our city, and our communities. And then finally, I have to continue progressing forward to okay, um, what are we supposed to be doing? And how do you know you are doing something? So, we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of work. So, yeah, let's get on into it. So, 5 minutes of fame. Okay, so what I've been in Kenosha. I first came here in 2005, came up from Florida. I remember calling my buddies back in Florida, and they're like, "So where are you at?" And I said, "Kenosha." And they said, "What?" And I would get used to that for the next 15 years of my life until about 3, 4 weeks ago. I remember getting excited whenever I was out and about in this world, to where you're just so used to people not knowing where Kenosha is or even ever hearing of the city, to where you just stop saying the name of the city. What you end up doing, you say, north of Chicago, south of Milwaukee. That's what you end up doing. I think there the first time where I heard someone talk about Kenosha that has never been to Kenosha, it was because they watched a television show. I think the show is called That 70s Show. I don't think I've ever watched a full episode myself, but I believe that the show was set in Kenosha, or maybe they lived near Kenosha, or maybe they drove in the town of Kenosha. But the 70s show, I believe, was clearly set around the 70s, and I'm told that Kenosha was mentioned in the show. So that was the first time. Every now and then you'd run into a traveling businessman who flew into Milwaukee or flew into Chicago or had business out here. Because while Kenosha may not be known in general public conversation, it's actually one of it's been a place that's always punched above its weight. By that I mean it's there's always been a lot of business going on here ever since, I'd say, even the early years, 1830s, 1840s. There's always something going on in Kenosha. Fast forward through the decades in the 1800s, this kind of became the mattress capital of the world. Moving on from there, things like instruments, so trumpets, trombones, brass. This was a world leader. Um, you continue forward. I think gunpowder was made here during the war. I don't remember. I think so. Um, Typewriter companies. Jockey is based out of this area. It's Kenosha Racine area. Jockey. Snap on tools. So that was one of the another early thing I noticed. I'm like, why does a town this small have this airport? And more importantly, why do I see so many planes going in and out every week? Because you got companies like Snap-on flying their VPs from all over the world and in here often. I don't know their actual schedule, but it looked like weekly nearly. So you've got these, this has always been a place where something's been going on. And I didn't even mention the car companies, AMC, Chrysler. There's always been something going on. For you older car head lovers, not you have to be age wise older. Nash Automotive was out of here, and there's just so much more I'm missing. But the tourism company doesn't pay me, so I'm not going to take it personal, or I'm not going to have a personal obligation to get them all in. So overall, you're just used to, if you're from the area or you end up living here or claiming this as your home, people not knowing what you're talking about, to where you get to the point where that's kind of the joke. Where do you live? Nowhere. I'm guilty of saying that myself once or twice. I live in nowhere. Well, nowhere got put on the map with the shooting by police officers of Jacob Blake. Now, I understand that I said it in plural, and some people might be saying, hey, he wasn't shot by police officers. He was only shot by one police officer. That's not really how it works. Whenever you put on a uniform, you represent each other. You're no longer an individual. That's the whole point of uniforms. You are a big part of something bigger than yourself. So the idea is, okay, you don't have a face, your town doesn't have a presence. All of a sudden, now it does. How do you handle your 5 minutes of fame? I'm watching individuals in elected positions and community leaders and organizers who um, are now getting a level of attention that, forget this exact reasoning, they were not ever prepared for. As a military officer, there's usually opportunities, almost always, there's opportunities for levels of training and dealing with the press. Even if that training is do not talk to the press, you get training. Even if that training is direct the press towards the public affairs office, you get training. I can tell you one thing that definitely jumped out in this the interactions this week is Kenosha in general, all the different factions. Um, we don't have to name them all. I'm just going to say, in general, the majority of the individuals and the organizations in and around Kenosha, they did not train for this. Most of the work to win a fight, and you can say what kind of fight, it doesn't matter. Whatever type of fight you're thinking in your head, this fits. If you want to think MMA, think that. If you want to think a rap battle, think that. If you want to think going up for a job against someone else who's qualified, think that. This holds. The majority of the effort that is needed to win is put in before the fight. So much so that the majority of fights are decided before the fight. Now, that statement's going to bother some people, but those are usually the people that keep losing to Vegas. If my statement did not have validity, Vegas would lose more than they win. Now, don't get me wrong. For those of you a little bit more savvy, You might be saying, Ray, well, there's a good part of it is that Vegas has a big stack of money, so they can last you longer. Valid. But that's not usually what Vegas is doing. Vegas is not usually getting spanked by the majority of your friends, and your friends just keep riding on black or doubling down and then finally losing. That's not normally what's happening. Normally, what's happening is people are losing. That is the majority of it. Case, situation is situation is situation, which is why we love upsets so much. It's why we love underdogs coming on top, because it's not the expected. Most games are decided before the game starts. Most fights are decided before they start. When it comes to engaging with the press, the moment the interview starts, it's already been decided. Question is, is it going to be revealed to us? And the answer is, one way or another, it's going to be revealed. So it's not even a question. The only thing to happen is for the truth to be revealed. Whether you're on my side of these arguments or on the completely opposite side, I have advice for all of you. The press is not your friend. They do not have your best interest in mind. Now, someone might be saying, fake news. No, I'm not saying fake news. A reporter could be solely about the truth. But I don't know your agenda. Maybe your agenda is not 100% about the truth. You know, humanity is not a binary thing. It's not a good or bad. It's not naughty list or nice list. So two reporters can have the same facts and tell no lies, neither of them. But one could write for a conservative paper and one could write for a left-leaning paper and put a completely different spin on it. I was reading responses regarding Biden's visit here in Kenosha. And so Biden made a comment about a gentleman. He didn't say him by name, but most people are assuming he's talking about a gentleman by the name of Vladimir. And he made the comment that it was a black man who invented the light bulb. Now, Fox News spoke on this. I will tell you this. They made Biden look like, let's just say, not good. But when you read their actual words in the write-ups, they told no lies. Having said that, CNN also covered it. And they did cover the truth that Biden said this and that it's not true. But when you read that CNN write-up, it doesn't make Biden look like what Fox News made him look like. They said Biden said that a black man invented the light bulb, but that is patently, no pun intended, patently false. According to records, Edison, most information supports the idea that Edison didn't steal this one. Now, they didn't continue on by saying that Latimer actually made an applicable one, because just because you come up with an idea doesn't mean you come up with a way to apply it. I want to say that again because we're going to connect that to our later topic. Just because you come up with a good idea does not mean you came up with a good way to apply your good idea. So people like me, I wasn't directly offended when Biden made the comment, because for me, it's like, okay, definition of a good contract is willingness, ability, and willingness. So someone could have came up with an idea and they could have even turned in the patent work. So yes, I agree they have the patent, but just because you have the patent doesn't mean you came up with the idea. So I didn't know this before it started coming up, but I wasn't personally immediately like, oh no, this is Edison. Eli Whitney in the cotton gin, there's a strong amount of evidence saying that yes, he has the patent, but no, he is not the inventor. Strong amount of evidence to support that idea. And you see these stories throughout American, not just American history, just history in general, that the person credited for discovering something is not always. Shoot, we can go back to way back, a couple centuries before America even existed. And we can talk about the father of calculus. There's it was hundreds of years until the individual who actually, there's a lot of evidence, the person who first, quote unquote, created, discovered, whatever you want to call it, calculus, um, came to be. Let's see here. Let's see if I get a year here. It was a big to do. Okay. So it was later 17th century, so the 1600s. Okay. So um, officially, if you say who is the inventor or father of calculus, it's Isaac Newton. But without getting too much into it, there's a lot of evidence that a guy named Leibniz was actually put out a paper first on calculus. So that happens a lot too in the world, where two or more people will come up with the same idea, individual innovation that's individual, independent of each other. So they're not aware of each other's work. The question becomes, for mankind's sake, who came up with it first and who shared it first? So you may or may not have heard a saying. So this is your first time hearing it, write it down. The graveyard is filled with great ideas. The graveyard is filled with great ideas, meaning very often men and women take great ideas to their grave. When they die, those ideas die with them because they never shared them. They never acted upon them. But in the case of Newton and Leibniz, it really came out to a popularity contest. Isaac Newton had more friends, so it was put up to this council to vote. But they all liked Newton better than the other guy. So even though the evidence showed the other guy, Leibniz, had proof that he published his papers earlier, they still gave it to their buddy. So my point in bringing that up is, if someone jumps up and says, "Yeah, the guy has the patent, but he didn't invent it," I will hear it out. Me personally. It's unfortunately a pretty rare thing, both in academia and patenting, that just because you made it to the patent office doesn't mean you deserve the credit. I mean, you've seen the jokes. If you steal a Tesla, is it an Edison? So there's a type of journalism that maybe appeals to you. Just because it appeals to you, is it in your best interest? So you vote, or you think, or you have the ideology, the political part of you that is left of center. If you only consume left of center journalism, is that what's best for you? Vice versa. If you are conservative and right of center, and all you consume is people who think like you, or rather people who write to have a high level of resonance with your personal political frequency. So when they write, you hum, you vibrate. Is that what's best for you? What if truth doesn't only exist at the frequency that you're comfortable at? What if you are a conservative or a liberal, but there are some liberal ideas that are more truthful than conservative ideas? Or there are some conservative ideas that are more truthful than liberal ideas? If you only listen or you only seek out communications, wavelengths, vibrations, if you only seek out energy within these finite parts of the entire truth spectrum, how does that benefit you missing out on truth that's coming out there, but you're just not built to hear it? Dogs have a higher range, a wider range of hearing than humans. Certain animals and insects can see ultraviolet and UV. Are you better off not being able to see that color spectrum? Are you better off not being able to hear that spectrum? Does someone sit around saying that? I'm so glad I'm missing out on seeing in the night. Cats can have better vision at night. Who says that? I am better off not being able to see in the dark. I argue that that's really what you're saying when you push through this world, only wanting information that resonates with you. I challenge you to say, seek out information that resonates with truth. So if you might then ask yourself, what's the difference? The difference is the focus of attention. Is it about you or is it about something bigger than you? Coming back to 5 minutes of fame. If you're not prepared for the current reality of journalists and reporters now showing up in your neighborhood and asking questions, you're blind to intent. And if you're blind to intent, like why people do the things they do, even though two people can have the same words presented or spoken, they could have completely separate intents. If you are blind to that dimension of human interaction, of intent, you are basically turning over your personal sovereignty. You are basically saying to this other person, I am not interested in being in control of my life. So I tell you what, you can be in control of my life. That's effectively what you're doing. You're saying you can be in control of my life. No one can take your sovereignty from you. You can only give it. If you give a bad interview live to the news, they didn't trick you. They didn't twist your words. They didn't set you up unless you were in a metal cage and they rolled out this metal cage and said, I accept, I'm going to go there. Even if you rolled out in a metal cage, you're still responsible for what comes out of your mouth. You and you alone. Only way that you're not responsible is because you refuse to speak. They then start speaking for you, and then they tell the public that that's what you mean when you don't speak. Coming back to how the fight is decided way before the fight. I will say this to the community members. You're not in elected positions, for example. Just because you're not in elected positions, and just because the city doesn't maybe hire you, a PR relations expert, it does not absolve you of responsibility for your impact on your community. If you jump up in front of these reporters, if you run up to that Associated Press reporter, you run up to that person with that pencil and pad and you start talking while they're writing, you are 100% responsible. I gave her interview on the phone the other day and I spoke for about 45 minutes. Next day I wake up and one of my friends, he's like, hey, you were quoted in a Milwaukee media outlet. And I read through it. 45 minutes of my conversation. They took 4 separate sentences. They chopped it up and put it together into one sentence. Now, luckily for me, even though technically the sentence I never said, because I kept staying on the same messaging, it didn't conflict with anything that I'd been saying. It didn't conflict. So I told my friend, like, I didn't actually say that, but it works. There's only one part that kind of bugged me a little bit where they made it seem like I didn't really know the full effects of what happens if a person has a firearm in their car or something like that. So they made it very inflammatory. So the way the sentence they restructured it, they took a couple comments I was talking about and they quoted me as saying, if you're a firefighter in Kenosha and the sheriff department pulls you over, instead of filing and you're drunk and you have a firearm in your car, they will simply just take you back to the firehouse. This is referring to a 2003 case, which actually, oddly enough, there's an open records request and ongoing bringing this back up by that gentleman, Kevin Mathewson, one of the leaders of that alt-right white militia group that was taken down on Facebook. So oddly, he's actually one of the people going after that case, bringing that back to attention of the corruption with behind the badge or with the service groups. So they quoted me as saying, which I never said, that had I been a black person, they would have gone to jail for 20 years. I never said that exact statement. I did talk about the question of, does everyone get treated the same? But I never said that exact sentence that had it been a black person, they'd go to jail for 20 years. So again, they chopped up some sentences, they put it together. And when I say they chopped up sentences, I know at some point I used that term 20 years. So here's what I said in another sentence. I said that if I acted the way that police officers acted in these streets when I was in the military, I would go to jail for 20 years. That I did say. As a combat officer, if I opened fire at a market and I said I feared for my life, that's Leavenworth, jail. I did say that. So that's what they did. They took the reference of me saying I can't behave like police officers. I would go to jail if I behaved a certain way, 20 years. They didn't take the fact that I brought up this case from 2003, and there's like 3 or 4 two other sentences. They chopped it all up and put it into this one readout. So what do you do about that? Because if you think about it, even though I told you they manufactured a sentence, it doesn't really conflict with any of the things I tell you. You basically have to train for your message before you go out and talk to them. It might look like I talk about anything and everything, but it's not the truth. The more and more you follow and you pay attention to how I speak, when I am not comfortable speaking about something in public, I don't take that as a reflection upon me. I don't think I'm less of a man because I don't know everything, because I've not read every book. I will say above my pay grade, outside of my scope, haven't studied it myself. All I would have was conjecture or hypothesis. Shut it down. Just stop. If you're supposed to be talking about your street neighborhood, and then they start asking you about a fiscal policy bill that's right now at the House of Representatives, and you don't know what they're talking about, say that. Say I'm not tracking on that. I'd have to look into that before I can get back to you. I don't feel comfortable talking about it right now because I haven't had a chance to go through it fully. Even if you haven't even gone through it at all, you're not lying if you're saying I've not gone through it fully. Say that. Don't let these reporters lead you. What does that mean? It's your moment. It is your moment. It is your moment to represent your street, represent your city, represent your community. You have a moment to a message. These last couple of weeks, people had opportunities to speak to the world, to speak to Biden. I mean, if you wanted to speak to Trump, you had opportunities. What comes out of your mouth is on you. So if you got on that national stage on an interview and you started talking about your baby mama, that's you, man. If you got on that national stage, you started talking about how the cops, found some weed on you and they threw your weed in the gutter, and you're like, that ain't right, man. Weed should be legal. That's what you have to say to the world. Right now, everyone's looking at us about civil unrest and equality. You're going to use this moment to push for legalization of marijuana so you don't get hassled because you smoke. That's your move. Now, that example was talking about selfish people. Selfishness manifests different ways. I'm also seeing hurt people. I'm seeing hurt people getting in front of microphones. Not everybody who wants to talk should be talking. You've had times in your life where you're angry or you're hurt. Maturity is about saying, I can't speak to you right now. Maybe you're in a relationship. I can't speak to you right now. Give me a moment to get myself together. Because if I speak now, I will say things I shouldn't say. Notice I didn't say I'll say things I don't mean. You very well could mean what you say. It could even be the truth. But maturity is about, should you say it? You can say a truthful thing that has zero benefit. You look at public discourse right now. Very often people are saying truthful things, but they have no benefit. We always like to focus on people saying untruthful things and talk about how that has no benefit. Yes, lies do not benefit. Big picture. Equally so, and sometimes even more, truthful comments cannot have a benefit or be detrimental. Me running around, me walking down the street and going, you're overweight, you're overweight, you're overweight, you're overweight. That does no benefit in society. That actually is a detriment to society. What? Do you think you walking up and down the street saying that there's going to be someone who's be like, he's right. Didn't notice. Then they start jump roping right there in the streets. You'll often hear people say that. Yeah, people don't like me because I speak the truth. No. If you are speaking the truth, people don't like you because you have no connection of utility with how you speak truth. Which is funny because even your statement, that's a lie. People don't hate people who tell the truth. People don't dislike people who tell the truth. People dislike people who do things that have no positive utility or purpose. I tell people things they don't want to hear all the time. They call me, they say thank you at the end of the conversation, they call me back. I'll sit there on a phone call with the guy for hours, telling him how everything that he did was wrong and telling him why it was wrong and when he went wrong and what he could have done. And the guy at the end will say, thanks for the feedback. Can I call you next week? This is not people who just enjoy pain. They're not paying me because they feel good when they're being made to feel bad. People are not bothered by people speaking truth if they feel that the intention behind it has good intentions. You maybe heard me say this before. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. There are people in your life that could tell you how you messed up today, and you're going to listen to them like their coach. A random stranger saying the exact same things, you're going to be like, who the hell do you think you are? They're saying the same thing. What's the difference? The difference is their intentions. You don't need an MBA to get a vibe off a person as to whether they're trying to build you or whether they're trying to break you. Now, if you're not used to getting feedback at all, if you don't have experience receiving feedback, it could be you. Again, these last couple of weeks, I've been engaging a lot of people who are new to this level of political dynamism. I've been having younger people come up to me and say, hey, I saw your show. Or, hey, I've been seeing you around. Who are you? Or, maybe it might be newly elected officials. I've been engaging people. And if I see an opportunity, I will ask them, like, or say, like, hey, um, I know we just met. You don't know me. So you have no reason to trust or believe me. But I saw you speak, or I've been hearing about things you're doing. Do you want me? Is it okay? Do you want me to share things, some thoughts, or would you rather not hear them? I'll even say, I have unsolicited advice. Are you interested? Because you didn't ask for it. So I have advice. I already built it. It's just for you. Are you interested? If they say no, which does happen, they'll be like, honestly, I'm tired. They won't say no. This is what they do. Oh, I'm tired. I got to get going. Actually, I'm busy. I got to get my kids. That's a no. Let it be. Let it be. Some of us, we push the issue. We'll be seeing someone online doing something that we know is wrong. And we need them to get fixed. We need them to fix themselves. But if we're honest, we're selfish too. How do you know? Because we need it. We need them to fix themselves. We're not talking about how the community needs them to fix themselves. We're talking about how we need it. Because if it's about the community, you'll do whatever it takes. If it's truly your highest as a community, you'll see someone saying some crazy stuff online, and you'll be like, you know what? That racist guy needs a black friend. I'm going to take one for the team. Because if he has a black friend, then he'll stop talking this way about black people. And that will make the community a better place. He'll be a better person. Community will be better off. I will invest that. So I'll tell you this right now, even if they are a racist, and believe me, I have called people racist and I will again if they're racist. But I don't use that term to manage people. I have never called someone a racist thinking that if they hear the word, they magically become self-aware and they become a different person. Now, I usually try to focus on behavior. So I usually try to say that is racist. That statement is racist. That narrative is racist. So if you follow through my opines and my interactions online, I will say, someone will say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, that's a white supremacist narrative. It's a narrative created by white supremacists. It's a narrative created by racists. I'm not saying they're racist. From what I'm told, not every guy who does gay porn is gay. So I'm not saying the guy is gay. I'm saying that guy does gay porn. So yeah, you might not be a racist, but you sell racist white supremacist narratives. I articulate it that way. There is who you are, what you are, and then there's what you do. Let's start at the easy stuff. Let's talk about what you do. So, yeah, I try to refrain from saying you're a racist. But yeah, your actions, your behavior, yeah, that's racist. That's what racist people do. Oh, when you see black people asking for freedom, you call them communists? Yes. Racists have been doing that since Martin Luther King. Yes, that's a racist tactic. What about black on black crime? Yes, that is a racist conservative tactic. What about black abortion? Racist. That's a racist thing. All it's racist. These are racist things. Doesn't matter how calm you say it, how questioning you say it. You know, I get that a lot in the Midwest. The guy will be like, well, I'm just asking. The reasons why you're asking about black on black crime and not white on white crime, that comes from a racist background. Someone put that in your heart. Someone put that in your head, but they didn't put in your head the full picture. That would so even if so unless you're saying you lived in a cave out in rural Wisconsin and on your own, you're like, huh, what about black on black crime? Unless you're saying you came to this on your own, you got it from someone. And that someone got it from someone. And the people who started that, they had statistics on black crime and white crime, and they saw they were pretty close, but they only shared one of them with whoever they shared it with. They said, oh, 87% of all crimes in the black neighborhood or murders or shootings, they're by another black person. Sell that. They did not say, oh, most white people are killed by white people and most black people are killed by black people. It Let me look into this. Oh, and I noticed that because of America's segregationist history, you know, where you live, whites and blacks are not allowed to live together. Most whites live by whites. Most blacks live by blacks. And then, criminals usually commit crimes of opportunity. Most crimes are not Ocean's 11 heist or Ocean's 12 or Ocean's 13. So since most crimes are not Ocean's 11 through 13 heist, they're actually crimes of opportunity. It was I stole out of that car because the car door was open and the car was in a neighborhood within walking distance. That's why I did it. Crime of opportunity. Therefore, the reason why white people mainly kill white people is that's who they live around. That's who they know. The reason why black people kill black people is because that's who they live around. That's who they know. They didn't present you that full picture. They took a sliver and they sold it to you. So that has reasoning behind it. Now, you could get very objective and say, you know what? It wasn't done out of racism. These guys just worked for the police union and they were creating a narrative to take the heat off the police force. It wasn't for racism. We don't hate blacks. We just wanted to protect the police. The police are not a people. That's a profession. You were willing to sacrifice people for a profession. Maybe you don't want to call it racism. Whatever you want to label that is, I guarantee you it's not good. Let's pick a business industry. Let's pick another profession. Let's say, let's say I work for the wine industry. I love wine. Wine loves me. I love scotch. Scotch loves me. Scotchy, scotch, scotch. If I start telling you that scotch is part of a complete breakfast, and it builds strong children. That might help the Scotch business temporarily because you all start buying and start giving it to your children, but it harms the general public. If you then say, clearly, Ray, you hate children, and I say, I don't hate children, I just love the Scotch industry. So fine, maybe I can convince you I don't hate kids. I damn sure don't like them. I don't respect them as human beings. I don't respect their best interest. I'm not looking at the bigger picture. For every Scotch maker that I would help, I'd be harming numerous children. That's a problem. That's why a lot of people are anti-unions when unions go bad. Now, an interesting dichotomy for a second here. Very often, pro-union people are anti-capitalism. Not all. There's just a correlation. Pro-union people can often be anti-capitalism. Pro-capitalism people can be anti-union. Here's where they're the same. Anti-capitalist people, at least the ones in my circles, these are educated and well-researched people. So they're not just sitting there saying, burn all money. They're pointing out the fact that America's version of capitalism is devouring America. It is actually a very ugly thing. They can not only articulate this, they can cite research showing that there are types of capitalism, and the American type of capitalism consumes more souls than it provides life, liberty, and justice for. You can present that case pretty effectively. You could show that for every person who benefits from the type of capitalism that America has, many more directly have to pay the price for that. But those same people can articulate that conversation, but they can't see, yes, the idea of unions is great. But too often, I didn't say sometimes, too often, the type of unionism practiced in America commits the same crime as the type of capitalism most often practiced in America. Or you take your eye off the ball. In the military, you say, mission always, people first. Mission always, people first. Most unions, they say, union always, period. Most capitalists, capitalism always, period. What it should be is capitalism always, people first. Capitalism has created all these positive things. Capitalism always, people first. Imagine had that been what this country was built on. Free markets always, people first. People first. How do you have slavery in a world that believes that practices that belief, that ingrains that into their children, into their families, into their guilds? How could you have ever had slavery had the saying been capitalism always, people first? How could you ever have a union that defends a, a bad employee? We don't have to talk about cops. You got your trade unions where that guy is a bad employee, but it's damn near impossible to fire him. But hey, if we let them fire one of us, then who are they coming for next? So we cover for our guy. Union always, people first. Not some people, all people. People, period. People first. A union that moves that way, yes, we are a union of three let's say we're a union of 1,000 people. Let's see, what industry would have 1,000 workers in Kenosha? I remember there was a period in time where I think Kenosha County had like 700 people with a realtor's license, active or inactive. So let's pretend, don't hold me to it. Let's pretend there are 1,000 people with a real estate salesperson or sales broker's license. Let's say they have this union, Realtors Association, and they said real estate business always, or realtors always, people first. And they practiced it. You know what you wouldn't have? Realtors sticking people into over leveraged and overpriced homes. Realtors selling pipe dreams they can't confirm. You would not have had any realtors running out telling people Foxconn is coming, so buy these high numbers. You would not be seeing that. And not just the realtors. You wouldn't see any investors running around doing that, which you did see. You saw realtors buying cheap stuff, fixing it up, purposely seeking out banks that will give them higher appraisals because there was this temporary moment of hysteria and saying, let's get every dollar out of these people before this hits the fan. They sold people houses they would never let someone sell their children at prices they would never allow their children to sign. They rented out places at prices they would, if their children said, hey, mama, papa, renting out a place, going to college, or hey, my first job, renting out at this rate, they would tell their kids, no, this is crazy. Don't you do this. Don't you sign this contract. This rent to own contract, do not sign this, kid, son, daughter, cousin, nephew, niece. They would never allow them to sign it. But they turned around and they did it themselves to other people they didn't know in their community. They did it to people in their community. I'll tell you this, if you have to tell me, it isn't. Every time I go on Facebook and I see someone claiming that through real estate, they helped out a veteran or they helped out a family, I'm like, you are full of shit. Every single time. You don't have to say it if it is. You don't have to. And that's another funny thing. People who talk like that, they're the first to misapply Matthew or Matthew 6. The left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. They're always the first to misapply that. But then they will turn right around and put up a posting saying, helped another person out of a bad situation. That might be possible that was a side effect, but that's not what you were there for. You are not going around helping people out of bad situations when there's no money on the table. You're not doing deals where you maybe do some paperwork, but you break even, but you help someone out of a situation. No, you're sitting there with your buddies and you're saying, I don't even bother with the deal if I don't clear 10 G's. And I've seen this conversation. I don't even bother with the deal if I don't clear 30 G's. That's your heart. Instead of writing, helped another person out of a bad situation, you should write, made me another 10 G's. Huh. Made me another 30 drop. I'm telling you about the 30 because you're never going to see that 30 in the community. You might see 3. You might see $13. I might help buy a backpack, but that actual money that's going to my side of town. So the common thing across all these comments here is intentions matter. Intentions absolutely matter. Do we have heartometers? Can you read my heart? Absolutely not. But take the James Baldwin approach. Someone asked me the other day who was the most impactful person for me, or one of the most impactful people, and I brought up James Baldwin. He was given this interview, and I often talk about it. I post it a lot. It was just very impactful for me hearing him engage and talk in this fashion. And the guy, he's actually like a Yale or Harvard professor, and he makes the comment that, hey, I don't. He's talking to James Baldwin, white guy. He's like, I don't understand why you make everything about race. I'm an academic. You're an academic. Me and you have more in common. I have more in common with you, a black man, than I do a white guy who's not an academic. So why do you make everything about race? Yes, it plays a role, but it's a very small, diminished role. And James Baldwin's response was the really hook part. He says, you know, I don't know if the local real estate association hate me because I'm black. I just know they will not sell houses to me and people who look like me in your side of town. He goes, I don't know if the school board is racist. I do know they don't, they give my children older books to read. And he starts going down the line in this fashion. I don't know if all cops hate black people. And I'm saying this now. He didn't say that example. I don't know if police departments are racist. I do know we have statistical evidence showing that while actually police do not shoot blacks, they do not kill blacks more often statistically. They do escalate to violence 4 times more often. And when they decide to shoot, they shoot more rounds and they shoot more effectively. So let me say that again. There was a Harvard study that showed that there was no statistical evidence that cops shoot black people more than whites. What it showed was when they do use their firearm, instead of firing 1 or 2 rounds, they fire 20, 30 rounds. And instead of hitting people in the shoulder and the elbow, they hit center mass more often. That's what the evidence showed. Now, there's other ways a police officer can elevate violence other than shooting you with their weapon. So what this report also showed was police are 4 times more likely to choose to escalate to force when it's a minority versus a white person. So the choice to use a taser or not, 4 times more likely. The choice to use tear gas or OC spray or not, pepper spray or not, 4 times more likely. The choice to rip out that baton, to get physical, 4 times more likely. That is where a person like me will say, no, I don't know an officer's heart. I don't know the police department's heart. The police chief don't know a thing about what's inside that man's head. Police, sheriff, law enforcement in general. All I know is that they are 4 times more likely to use violence because of the color of my skin, regardless of the situation. That's all I know. Now, where James Baldwin continued with this was, when you ask me to pretend like this evidence doesn't mean something, you're asking me to live life differently than you. You operate off of evidence. You're the type of people that when you see the video of the shooting, you still say, let's wait till all the facts come out. Let's not jump to any conclusions. Let's wait till the full investigation. And honestly, that's not offensive. But you're asking me to have faith when you demand evidence. That's something that I observe, and it's something that I question. Why do you live a life based on evidence? But whenever I try to look at you, you want me to practice faith. Do you think yourself a god? Is that why you're asking me to have faith? Have you fancied yourself a god? And not only have you fancied yourself a god, are you a god that you believe something like me should revere, should look up to, should serve. Because you yourself don't have faith in me. And I'm okay with that, by the way. I'm okay with you not having faith in me. You need evidence from me. I'm okay with that. But what is this relationship if you always need evidence from me, but you're always instructing me to not only have faith in you, but have faith in you despite the evidence, despite how you walk, despite how you talk? Have evidence that you're the opposite of what I see. What would you call such a relationship? While you work on that, I say let's talk on a proposal of what I would argue is a more effective relationship. Life's too short, and we have a lot of work to do. So instead of me asking you to have faith in me or vice versa, why don't we work together on building a system that has evidence based features to where if one or both of us does not uphold our part of the bargain, we'll see it and we can walk away. I often say when people, they're like, what's your deal, Ray? What are you about? Are you legit? My response normally is, why don't we just get to work and find out? If I'm not even half what I claim, let's find out today. I'm not going to fight a guy. If a guy comes up and says, I'm the hottest rapper alive, if he says to me, I'm going to name for you the 5 hottest rappers right now, and he says his own name 5 times, I'm not going to spend the day fighting with him about how he's not the top 5 hottest rappers. I'm going to give that man the mic. That's what I'm going to do. Let's find out today. Give the man the mic. That's the quickest way. Let's stop talking. Let's get to work. And it's amazing how so many people are used to the world talking that when you talk that way, it makes your life more efficient. And how so? Because people who are talkers, and meaning they'll only talk, as long as you let the talk stay at talk level or let the relationship stay at talk, they'll stick around forever sometimes. Imagine a bad relationship or imagine a relationship that didn't work out, even a good one, but it didn't work out. A relationship that doesn't work out, it's not meant to be. Would you rather that relationship last 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years, or 3 minutes? If our engagement is not meant to be, I'd rather find out today, quickly, so we both can move on. I have a certain idea of who and what I am. When someone says that I'm something other than that, it's possible they're right. I want to find out today. Earlier, I gave some facilitation with a group of people here in Kenosha. So this was the actual idea. The idea was, um, right now, public discourse and, well, always public discourse in the community is getting worse and worse. People don't know how to talk to each other. So here is the mission plan: teach people how to help facilitate better discussion and social media throughout the community. People who are already actively engaged in social media, let's start sharing tips and tactics for how to influence better communication in our community online. And some interesting things came up during that conversation. One individual, they stated, they posed a question to me and they said, well, how do you decide who to save? So what their question is, when you're seeing a conversation, someone, let's say someone's being super racist or, being pseudo racist, and you're trying to engage them, but they're not changing, they're not affecting. How do you decide who is worth it and who is not? And my response is, short answer is you don't. You don't decide who's worthy of being saved and who's not worthy of being saved. You don't decide who is capable of being reached and who isn't. Only thing you control is you. So what you decide is who are you capable of saving and who are you not? Who are you capable of reaching and who are you not? When I engage a person and they don't go my way, that's my failure. I tell myself that's your L. Now, I don't go slit my wrist. Imagine being a professional ball player. LeBron James doesn't quit basketball when he loses a game. Part of the business. Ideally, it's not most of the business, but it's part of the business. So no, I don't decide who's worthy. Think of being a rescue swimmer. I don't decide who can be saved and who can't be. I decide who am I capable of saving and who am I not capable of saving. Who is close enough, given my level of strength as a swimmer, that I can reach and get us both back safely ashore. And who is too far out for me to reach them. Tying this back to our original statement, our original conversation about community groups, individuals and groups. I think anyone who stands up to any way, shape, form, or fashion to speak about their community or on behalf of their community, um, in a way, they're a rescue swimmer. But not all rescue swimmers are built the same. Some have the endurance to swim for hours in calm waters, but can't last a minute in rough seas. Some people can't swim for hours in calm waters, but they can tear through waves, monsters. They're like sharks for like a short period of time. You've got strength swimmers, you've got endurance swimmers. You got, I was one of those odd swimmers that I swam very fast underwater. I had the strength to jump out of the helo, take off that flotation suit. So it's just on one leg. I could swim the length of a pool underwater, come back up and put the suit on. That was something I could do. I sucked at treading water, hated treading water. I loved the flotation suit. As a community member, if the community is something higher than yourself, you will not volunteer for rescue missions you're not equipped to handle. You will be transparent and honest so that One, a mission that's important doesn't fail because they sent the wrong person. And also, so you don't create two casualties, yourself and the mission. No one wins if, let's say, you're a swimmer and you pulled a muscle or you broke your leg, but you just want to do the right thing. So you volunteer to go out anyway. You swim halfway there, that person drowns and you drowned. The time they wasted watching you, they could have sent someone else. You didn't do the world any favors. Seeing a lot of people jumping out in front of the microphones, willing to be loud, willing to be aggressive. Like, hey, I even talk about some of the protesters. Hey, we're willing to get in the police face. We're willing to yell at them and tell them off. I'm sure that has a place sometimes, maybe. Um, but what about the times it doesn't? There's people I do not align with politically, but we have, to some degree, open lines of communication. They can call me on my cell phone. I can call them, and they know that I have a certain level of values and principles. That conversation is not going to be put out in the streets. It's not going to be said, hey, that's why, here's his phone number. I got his cell number, or I got her cell number. Go harass her. That's a useful thing. Even in wars, embassies are still important. Communication across the lines is still very important. I was sharing earlier with that same group that some of your nastiest warfare on this planet occurs after the embassy shut down. People always say, oh, I hate politics. I hate politics. And a war, one of the things you don't want to see happen is those embassies shutting down. What I see in Kenosha personally is, let's just make it very binary. We all know there's not just white people and black people in this world. But for this culture issue here, it falls along opinions on race. So let's just, for this is a model, okay? Think of a statistical model. There's an old saying by a guy named Cox, it's a statistician, COX. And he says that all models are wrong, but some are useful. What he's saying is there is no mathematical model that fully explains reality. We capture data points as we can. If I walked into a room that you happen to be in and I simply collected your gender, that's truthful. That could be useful. But for me to infer that the only thing about you is your gender, that is wrong. Hence the statement, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Because there is no model that collects every data point about you or collects every data point about the community. So I want to present to you a model. Hasn't been vetted. I admit I made it up. Maybe you could tear it apart. I argue that the reason why things are getting so nasty in America right now along this issue of civil unrest regarding race relations is because the embassies are shut down. Honestly, I'm not even sure if they even exist. Put it this way, the Taliban doesn't have an embassy. Kind of makes it difficult to negotiate peace. We don't even know which building to go to say you want to talk about peace. I'll often hear that, let's say the white side of town when I'm over there, and I'm over there often. Right? Well, we'd love to talk, but we don't know who to talk to. Where are the leaders? I usually respond to them. Have you gone over there to find it out? Have you engaged anybody? Having said that, they're like, well, what building? Where do we go to? I'm like, well, let me ask you the question back. Where's the white people building? Where do I go to? Who represents all you white people? Give me that name. Give me the name of that person. Give me the address of that building. Give me the location. I, Ray Roberts, want to negotiate a peace treaty with white people. Who do I talk to? You see how silly the statement is? The desire isn't silly. The desire to engage is not silly. The inference that there should be a single building or a single place or a single person. You hear that a lot with Black Lives Matter. Who's in charge of Black Lives Matter? Who's in charge of white supremacy? You tell you what, you give me the name of the guy in charge of white supremacy. I will give you a name of the person in charge of Black Lives Matter. We'll get them sit down at a table. Let's negotiate truce. Let's start working out peace treaties. These are both decentralized, anomalous things. But maybe for those of us seeking to have a better way, maybe we should be talking about embassies. But I argue that in today's age, they probably should not be physical buildings. I've talked about this before. Rodney King was 92. One city burned for 3 days. Fast forward to the age. Oh, that was a VHS cassette tape. You hold it like this, video turned into the news. News made copies, shared it with other news stations. Today, shootings are being live streamed in real time over Facebook and Twitter. Cities went up in flames following George Floyd. Therefore, things move so fast, they go viral. I don't see the utility in a physical building to try to put out that quick flash fire before it occurs. The fires in our society right now, they are spontaneous combustion situations that arise through social media. Therefore, I argue any solution that has a chance of working would have to operate in that same playing field. I started doing face-to-face facilitations on race, going in the rooms physically and saying, let me talk to you about Black Lives Matter. Due to COVID, I started going Zoom calls, not going back. Not that I won't speak to people face-to-face, but the reach is just so much greater. I'm now teaching other facilitators how to have that same conversation and how to engage in social media even. The next step is to teach people how to teach facilitation. You see that going viral to where the next time something pops off crazy or some warped philosophy start moving through Facebook, I do this thing where I'll take a meme and I'll logically dissect it. Imagine if you had 5%, just 5% of the people on Facebook doing that to memes in general. People who like creating false memes, going on Facebook would suck. You know what they would have to do? They'd have to do what you see a lot of racists doing now. They are creating these hidden private rooms so they can go be racist with each other. They can't do it in public. Facebook is making racists afraid to grin. You can actually see their conversation where I can't say what I want to say anymore. Or they're going to these rooms. Now, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing people create accounts or just being white And they're going into these rooms to infiltrate. They're collecting all the names and they're putting these people out. They write what they put and they put out into their employers. They are making racists afraid again. Let's make all ignorance. Let's make ignorance run and hide. Let's make it to where, man, every time I put up an ignorant post, it feels like the world is coming at me. And not coming at me, but coming at what I said. I put up an ignorant post about black on black crime, and all of a sudden I see Ray Roberts tag 30 people that have gone through his training. And then Ray says, okay, class, who would like to handle this one? And that person just goes. And then someone else, then I say, okay, rest of the class, let's critique how well they did. Okay, next person try. And they're watching how their page becomes a classroom. They're like, I don't like this. What do they do? So that maybe they block me. But then they have to block the 30 people I tagged. But let's say the 30 people I tagged also tagged 30 people. They have to go and block everyone in the community with this like-minded approach. So let me ask you this. If I block 100,000 people who live in Kenosha County because they challenge the way I talk, at what point is it no longer me blocking people and me ostracizing myself from society? At what point? I honestly don't think you got to get 100,000. There are 174,000 people in Kenosha County. Honestly, I'll say when you get to the point where you even have blocked, I don't mean fake accounts or Russian accounts. I got a block list of tons of those. But I'm saying in your community, real people, I would honestly say when you had to block 300 people who live in your community, that's it. When you got to block 50 people, 60 people who live in your community, because when you speak, they keep correcting you. That says more about you. That says more about you. You know, you now have to avoid places because of your behavior. I'll tell you this right now. There are still places in Kenosha that to this day, I have ostracized myself from. Because when I was dating, I dated a lot. So now that I'm married, I don't want to walk into a room and see 4 or 5 of my ex-girlfriends. That's weird to me. It's weird. The business has not put up a sign saying whites only, or in my case, anyone not named Ray Roberts only. They didn't do that. They did not tell me I can't go. My behavior is the cause of me not being able to go, because it would be awkward sitting there looking at 3 or 4 of your ex-girlfriends, or even one. I'll tell you one thing. Had someone told me what maturity would look like, I would have behaved myself a lot more when I was younger, because there's some places I actually miss. Like, man, I miss that place. She was not worth it. The time with her was not worth it. I miss that place. Main reason I behave myself these days. Sure, you can say it's because it's the right thing to do, but it's like, hey, I'm not acting up in my Irish bar. I love that place. This is our community. This is your community. You choose your behavior to where are you going to act in such a way you have to ostracize yourself out because people speak the truth to you. On my list of things I said I was going to talk about, I had included that um, I wanted to talk about basically biracial children. So one of the parents is black, one is white. I saw a conversation earlier where people were having this conversation where, again, I'm just kind of spectating. I didn't actually directly get involved, just kind of watching, chatter. And you know how when a meme or something gets shared, you can follow through it and see how other people have shared it. So I can see this conversation here from this share, then this conversation here from this share, and I just keep boom, boom, boom hitting in. So what I saw was something that through self-organization and society, um, that's what it was. Through self-organization and our local community, this is a conversation that's popping up now. White women who have children with black men who then they end up in a co-parenting situation so they don't get married happily ever after. And people are seeing these white women with their biracial children saying some pretty tone deaf things or sharing extremely tone deaf memes regarding race relations. This is a new one for me. Before we dig too deep here, let's see what we got going. I wish the word and the understanding of Eurocentrism was more popular. I believe it heals instead of divide because it's a more accurate notion of what's going on. Okay, so this is not my this is not one of my strongest points of education or study. So anyone and everyone, this is live, real time. Call me out, but I'm gonna try to free flow with this. So Eurocentrism is basically the idea of normal or right being European, being white, being European culture. And anything that's not that being different or odd. Like, so I'm gonna keep that back up. So in a business setting, um, I wear many hats. Um, One of them you could say is as a change agent. So when you go into a company, you want to be a change agent. Let's say you are that position. And one of the earlier things I say when I come into the room is I give a definition of the word culture. Here's my definition of the word culture. Culture is everything you don't question. Culture is everything you don't question. Your culture is everything you don't question. This is a roundabout way of digging in on what William's talking about here. Eurocentrism is the culture where you don't question European culture. You just accept it. It is the is. It is the self-explanatory. Because it exists, it's validating. Its existence on its own validates its truth. A Eurocentric culture doesn't question European values, dogmas, tenets, beliefs, gods. Your culture is everything you don't question. If I'm walking down the street and I see you eating a bowl of Skittles with a spoon, I'm going to question that. That is not in my culture. I have a don't eat Skittles with a spoon centric culture. If you ask, why do all the black kids sit together at lunch? Why do all my black coworkers sit together at lunch? But where you work is only 5% black. That means in your culture, all the white people sitting together with just white people is your culture because you didn't ask about that. Even though the majority of people at the lunch table are white, and the majority of the white people are sitting with other white people. If you ask who's in charge of BLM and where is your building and your website and your list of things you want, but you didn't ask who's in charge of white supremacy and where is their building and what do they want, that's an indication that your culture is white supremacy, because you're asking about BLM because it is outside of what your culture is. Now, let me go a little slower here. I did not say that if you asked about BLM, but you didn't ask about white supremacy, that you are a white supremacist. I did not say that. I said, if you have ever asked who's in charge of BLM, but you'd never asked who's in charge of the KKK right now, or FBI keeps talking about white domestic terrorism, if you were not going around asking who's in charge of that team, who's in charge, you asked who was in charge of radical Islam, you knew Osama bin Laden's name. So you have asked about terrorists before. If you have never had the notion internally, I don't mean Ray Roberts pushed you into a corner and was holding back your finger and said, ask about white supremacy or I'm going to break your finger. That doesn't count. I'm saying no one forced you to ask about radical Islamic terrorism. You got curious. You looked into it. No one asked you to look into who's in charge of BLM. You needed to know that. Something inside you needed to know that because it's outside, and you ask because it's outside your culture. You don't question your culture. Meaning, if you don't ask about white supremacy, it's because it's part of your culture. There's things I think about, things I wonder about. So I was a young adult and I remember trying to understand, why do those guys deal drugs? Is that to get a job? The fact that I'm asking is not part of my culture. I used to ask, why do people who live in the country sit around talking about hating the city so much, but half them sell stuff to the city or they have jobs in the city and they drive back to the country? I had to ask because it's not my culture. I had to understand it and truly try to understand the pathology. Wisconsin has 72 counties, the majority of them rural. That means if you are in Kenosha or in Wisconsin, you're going to run into a lot of white guys who parrot out Fox News comments like, all the cities are democratically ran and look at them. All these police issues, they're always in the city areas. You don't see it in the rural areas. Let's dissect that. Most often on the black side of town, you have white police officers from rural areas. Basically, it's kind of crazy. What you have police forces of people who were raised up in places they don't understand the culture, which is why they ask so many questions about it. It's not their culture. They don't question the culture they were brought up in, the culture of sitting there talking trash about cities, but go get a job in the city. They never asked, why do we do that, Pop? Why do we sit around talking about the Democrats, but we use things they make? Ain't no damn cell phone made out on the farm. There is no farmer's cell phone. There is no rural company making cell phones. So, hey, why do we rural people sit around talking about the people who make all the stuff we use? Yeah, we grow corn, but the machines we use to grow the corn, they made. So, why do we sit around talking about people who we then take the goods that they use? Even when we're sitting there on Facebook, we're sitting there on a device made by the libtards talking through a software program made by the libtards about how useless the libtards are. We go work in the city for the libtards. If we're a cop, on the side of our car says protect and serve. But in my mind, I'm just trying to stay alive because my culture told me that the city is a war zone. So I don't see these as fellow citizens. I see myself as leaving a good place and going into a foreign country that is a war zone. The fact that if this is your life and you don't question this, that is your culture. A culture of sitting around, making an enemy out of the very constructs that keep you alive. All this talk about how if the police go away, the the city will burn. City could destroy this culture by requiring that all cops have to live in the area. Let's see here. The exact phrase I would replace Eurocentrism with: white supremacy isn't real or measurable, but Eurocentrism is. All cultures are measurable. All cultures are measurable. Um, Dominant cultures like this one and non-dominant cultures, William, are equally measurable. So at the end of the day, oppression is a crime of opportunity. So while a strong argument with lots of evidence could be made that this form of culture has been one of the most destructive, I would never trust anyone who would claim that this is the only destructive culture. How you have white supremacy as a destructive culture, and it's the one plaguing us. There's entire worlds here in this world where there's no white people or black people, and there's still cultures hacking another culture up, serving them up as slaves. Southeast Asia, I don't follow as much as I should, but I'm now getting more news feed from that area. There's a lot of crazy stuff we don't talk about. Out there in Nigeria right now, northern Nigeria, actually you actually break it up into three parts. You have middle Nigeria and you have northern Nigeria. Stuff going on right there. It's a lot more complex, and it is not about white supremacy. When you're looking at what's going on the ground, it's while it might have externality effects, it might come from drawing country lines by white supremacists. But those people running around with those machetes, they don't know that history. Caliphates, when you get on the ground, when you actually get on the ground on these other places in the world, you realize it, no pun intended, it ain't black and white. So here in America, the issue indeed is Eurocentrism. I mean, look at our culture, the a good what the idea of a good looking woman is. You may be seeing these things on Google where or TED Talks maybe where they will say just Google professional hairstyles That's one. Go try that. I think they might be dealing with it now, but go Google. Actually, let's just do it together. Yeah, let's stop talking about it. Let's be about it. Let's let's stop talking about it. Let's be about it. All right. So I am going to Google professional hairstyles. But for those of you who are not, like, what is this Eurocentricism? Like, I didn't know Ray was a Pan African. I'm not a Pan African. Ask any actual Pan African. Half of them think I'm a sellout. So I just Googled professional hairstyles for men. Ooh, look at that. One brother made it. One brother made it. Okay. Progress. Progress. Look at the rest of the photos, though. That's Googling professional hairstyles for men. Okay. Let's try unprofessional hairstyles for men. Ooh, look at all that color. I didn't plan that, by the way. I don't. Me and William did not get on the side. You saw what I wrote was going to say. I did not plan this. If you want to know what Eurocentrism is, I just showed you what Eurocentrism is. That is Eurocentrism. Oddly, our boy is on both sites. Look how much color gets on the screen. Basically, unprofessional means black, according to try DuckDuckGo. Okay, yeah. I just read a book by one of the DuckDuckGo co-founders. Um, it's called Super Thinking. I think Weinberg. Check that book out. Super Thinking. It's about different mental models. So DuckDuckGo is basically a search engine, everyone, but they don't track your cookies or anything. They don't remember stuff about you. Let's see here. Uh, oh, sorry. I'm in images. All right, let's go ahead and get her done. So I'm adding it in here on this system here. So a weird thing, as an analyst, as a data scientist, I actually know, I'm not going to say I know it all. I don't work for Google. I have a little bit of idea how these analytics and algorithms work. So I kind of manipulate them to help me do what I want to do better. So actually, when this is all done, I'm actually going to take DuckDuckGo. I'm going to turn it off. But okay, so looks like we're in. Start searching. All righty. Try it again. Professional hairstyles for men. I see one. I see. You all have your own opinions, but I actually see a lot more. How do I say this? I see a lot more diversity. African Americans are 13, 14% of the U.S. population. So I'm okay that half the pictures are not black. We're not 50% of the population. Oh, and look at that. We got a guy that doesn't exactly look white or black, acknowledging that the world's not binary. I'm kind of liking this so far. Let's go to images. So I got some minorities at the top. It looks better. Let's keep scrolling. It gets a little whiter. No, no, I'm going to say this looks a little bit more like America. Notice I didn't say the world. The world is brown. America is majoritively white for a little while longer, a very little while longer. But yeah, Are you kidding me? We might have to do an entirely separate show on that. Okay, I'm not going to get too confused here or sidetracked. Let's go unprofessional hairstyles for men on DuckDuckGo. Still a lot of color here. I think that's funny they called out royalty, but maybe they're just hating because he's got a black wife. Still a lot of color. Well, that I agree with. What on earth? But so I don't know what you guys saw there. You have your own eyes. I'm gonna give my own opinion. I saw a step in the right direction, but I'm still, at least I'm seeing more. I'm seeing white faces. You know, I'm seeing a step in the right direction for DuckDuckGo. Still seeing a little bit more skewedness. I'll use so skew. Okay, I got to try to stick in some statistics here. You've all heard of the bell curve when the teacher grades on a curve. Okay, so that's our bell curve, nice and even in the center, right? Skewness. When I say that, so the bell curve will have that nice hump in the middle, right? Skewness, though, is when you lean to the left or the right. So we could say a normal distribution would have been for unprofessional hairstyles, it being, in the middle, some black, some white, some black, some white. We saw on Google a heavy skew towards unprofessional being black and professional being white. That's what I mean by skew. I saw less of a skew in DuckDuckGo, but I still visually perceived the skew. But visual analysis is a poor indicator. So take it for what it's worth. I did not know that. So William's saying that it's the Bing algorithm without the tracking. So I was not aware of that. Okay. You make an interesting comment there, William. I don't want to get too far off the main heart tonight, but I think I want to make that a show topic in the next couple days. So I'm going to say I said it, so I'm accountable now. Mechanized dominance is Eurocentric too. I never heard that said. I've never thought it, but I have studied, and it's part of my job. I'm a data scientist. Every decision has a cost. So part of my job, if I'm doing my job properly, is asking the question, what is the cost of automation and algorithms and data science and our ever continuing pursuit towards efficiency? So, yes, I am paid to make things more efficient, to optimize. But if I truly have the fiduciary responsibility that I should also be giving any solutions that I present in context to their cost. I should not be telling you all upside, no downside. So there's a good chunk of my research and my investigation. Every decision has a cost. So I'm aware that mechanized dominance has negative effects. I've never thought of tying the concept of optimization and efficiency specifically towards Eurocentrism. Having said that, it's not questioned because it's culture. So yeah, we could dig into that another day for sure. We went down an interesting tunnel there, but I want to come back to what I was watching online today, and that is white women who have had a child with a black man. They did not marry or stay happily together, happily ever after. They split. They now have biracial children that they're co parenting, and people are observing these women. It seems to be mostly women um, who are now online saying some things that, if that's your mother, that might, in some people, including me, opinion, jack that kid up. Now, for disclosure, my ex wife, my first wife, is white. We have two children together, my two oldest. So I do have two biracial children with a white woman. So I'm going to try to engage this in an objective way so we can keep the conversation going to a utility, an applicable way for the majority of the audience. It does not become a conversation about my personal life. Not that I'm trying to hide anything from you, but rather the goal here is these conversations is they should be mutually beneficial conversation, not therapy for Ray Roberts. Because I'm pretty sure therapy is only mutually beneficial when the therapist is getting paid. And I ain't trying to pay none of y'all. So I can say, well, let's talk about what I'm seeing. So basically, individuals are seeing, see if I can find it actually. There's, okay. So this is the first place I saw it. So let me go ahead and just see if I can. Okay, so this has been shared through the world. So Rick's got an open page, so I don't feel I owe him anonymity. He put world on. So this is the picture. Now, I think Rick's a guy, so, but my point is this. So you can see what it says there. Or if you can't, I'll read it to you. So a white guy shoots and kills a black cop, father of three, and there isn't a word from Black Lives Matter. The NBA, NFL, NHL, and Major League Baseball. But if a cop kills a black career criminal or sex offender, they want to burn the city down. Think about that for a minute. Okay, let's think about it for a minute. Here's the first thing I'm thinking about. Um, Same old tired wolf philosophy of trying to say that state sanctioned misbehavior is no different than civilian misbehavior. I have police to deal with civilian misbehavior. This was a criminal who committed a crime. What would I be protesting? What do you want Black Lives Matter to say? This is more to that. Basically, what you're saying is before Black Lives Matter can hold the police department that they pay a job, they must first become billionaires, dress up like Batman, and run around in the middle of the night punching guys like this to a pulp. So, first thing I see is that level of ignorance. There is a difference between the employee you pay and the customer. If you own a business and you walk in and there's a customer just cussing and throwing things around and breaking chairs, and then you have an employee also cussing, running around, breaking all the chairs, I can almost guarantee you might yell, "What are you guys doing?" But you're going to have a higher level of accountability for that employee who you cut a check to biweekly or weekly than you do that customer. You're going to tell that customer, "I'm calling the police and I'm filing charges." You're going to tell that employee, "I'm calling the police, I'm filing charges," and you're fired. One of the guys in this picture worked for me. One doesn't. A criminal committed a criminal act. And yes, even if a cop kills a career criminal or sex offender, I don't pay cops to be Judge Dredd. I don't want judge, jury, and executioner on the streets. What is so hard to understand about that? I don't want judge, jury, and executioner roaming the streets. I want a process to be followed. I want police to do the job they were paid for. And yes, I hold police, my employee, to a higher level of standard than I do the criminal. Even when I'm pulled over, so I'm speeding, caught, clean as day. I'm the criminal. I still want the police officer to act with a higher level of professionalism than even me. One of us is being paid to be there. One of us is not. Even while I'm being frustrated and upset, I don't want him being frustrated and upset or her. No, I don't think because I'm upset, it's okay for them to be upset. I don't want them mirroring me. Again, they're paid to be there. Now, if we stop paying police officers and we stop giving them guns, yeah, we can have this conversation again. You can renegotiate the relationship. They are just volunteers and no guns, no badges, meaning I can volunteer whether or not I speak to them. I can volunteer to respect their authority and not be breaking the law. If their authority is a voluntary choice on my part and the government recognizes that, then yes, let's renegotiate the contract. But for right now, as things are, it's a mantle. And yes, higher expectations. So, what the conversation thread was about is people are seeing these women who have biracial children posting things like this. So, what this means is instead of teaching their half black children the things that I'm speaking about right now, they are confirming that this is proper logic. They are teaching their biracial children that this is truth. You can be the worst parent in the world, your kids still love you. You can be the biggest dirtbag, your kids still get excited that you might show up, even though you never show up. This is one thing I've learned about children. They love you regardless, and they believe in you regardless. The hard part is when they become adults, and sometimes they have to face the fact that their parents, that father or mother, they have to reconcile that idea of father and mother with the idea of a man and a woman, a good man and a good woman. But we're not going to get into that now. Let's talk about a kid. I've met many a white person who were raised where racism was taught at the dinner table. And they had to figure out their own way. And they had to reconcile. How do I say this? They had to reconcile. That's their family. You don't hate your parents because of actions. They're still your parents. But they have to reconcile that, hey, my mom, my dad, they did things, they said things, they taught me things that were not in my best interests. I've talked to many a grown man. So let's just spin the race part for a moment. Raised by a single mother, And they grew up their whole life, especially I'm talking about boys now. They grew up with a mother saying, your father ain't nothing. He's trash. Women not realizing that every time you say that, you're telling that boy that part of him is trash. He comes from his father. So every time you say it, you're saying, you're half trash. You're half trash. You're half trash. But it's their mother. It's the parent that was there. It's the parent that fed them. But what you quickly realize, well, I'm sorry, you don't quickly realize. What comes to light through this conversation is the very people feeding you can also be starving you. You eat through different ways. There is your, let's call it your physical digestive tract. Oh, I didn't see where we're going here. I think I'm about to steal from my buddy Steven. He's been on the show a couple times. So that mother feeds and clothes that child physically. But that same mother is starving out, emaciating that boy spiritually. It is completely possible to make it to the age of 18 only eating Instamac, ramen noodles, and hot dogs. I guarantee when they look at your blood pressure and your sodium levels, they're going to recommend that you don't recommend that to others as a way of growing up. There will be a cost to that decision. You can absolutely be raised by a mother who feeds and clothes you. And I know, and it go the other way. I, for several years, I was co-lead of a group where here's the odd thing. Yeah, it was about single fathers. So divorced dads or dads who just split. So I was co host of this group. And very often we would get guys at the very beginning of a break in relationship. And one of the first rules we had to make was we're here for you. We're here to be community, but no bashing exes. There's no utility in it. And we would say the rule, and people was like, oh, yeah, fine. But you would every now and then have to correct somebody. You'd have to remind them of this rule. I think it was actually our only rule. I think that was our only rule of this group. No bashing exes. A group of guys sitting around talking about their exes and how horrible they are. Not only is it no good for them, and if you get into a room and you start spitting that hatred back at each other, it's not good for the group. But it was single dads group. It doesn't matter if you think the kids don't hear you talking that way. You emanate that when you go back to them. Kids are highly intuitive. You put that vibe off. Whatever is in your heart, you will put that off to your children. Whatever you are about, they will perceive it. I remember I met a guy. He had been in and out of jail the majority of his adult life. But he was talking about how he had 2 sons and 1 daughter. And the 2 boys were in jail, but the daughter wasn't. And he was telling me this to explain that that is proof that at the end of the day, your children, they're going to do what they want to do. That you as a parent, you have no influence over them. Little to no influence. So he continued talking. He said, look, my daughter, she's never been in jail. She's a nurse. She's an RN, doing well, taking care of herself. But my 2 boys, he said, I never let them visit me when I was in jail. Whenever I was in jail, I never let their moms bring them to me. I said, no, I don't want them to see where I'm at. So even though my boys, this is him still talking, even though my boys never saw me in jail. So because they never, he goes, even though they never saw me in jail, they still ended up in jail. So it's proof that no matter what the parent does, kids are going to do what they want to do. That's what he said to me. He did not realize that those boys did not have to actually physically see him in jail for him to be in and out of jail to have an influence on their lives to where they now live adult lives in and out of jail. He didn't see it. You talk to anyone who works with single parents or kids growing up in a single parents household, you will find very few of them professionals who disagree with what I'm about to say to you. The parent who is not there can have as much impact as the parent who is there. It's possible that the parent not there can have as much impact as the parent who is there. Equally so, the parent who is there, the negative impact that they have on that child, even though they're there, even though they're feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even though they're making sure that house has heat and it has electricity, and they make sure they go to school and they make sure they do good grades, they can still have as negative an impact on that child becoming an adult, a well high, what am I trying to say here? A well adjusted, is that what I'm trying to say? A well adjusted adult, the parent who is there every day, can have just as negative an impact on that child being a well adjusted adult or greater adverse impact than the parent who wasn't there. And that's what we're talking about here. A white mother or father validating this type of thinking here, that an argument could be made is as dangerous, as destructive, even more dangerous, even more destructive to that child than the absentee parent. When I see the Candace Owens, and when I hear a local person who is a person of color and they're sitting around saying things I normally hear Republicans say, it doesn't surprise me at all. I run into people who hate themselves every day. Black and white, Mexican, Latin, men, women. I run into people who hate themselves every day. I've dated people that hate themselves. I remember one girl, she grew up in a culture where if a man doesn't knock you around every now and then, he doesn't really care about you. That's her culture. So it really bothered her that when I was upset with something she did, I would just kind of get real quiet and just kind of go off on my own. I'd say, you know what, I need some space. I would say that. That really bothered her that I would say, I need some space, and I would go out and, hang out with the boys for a couple hours and vent with the boys instead of stay in the house, scream at the top of my lungs with her and smack her around a bit. She wanted the latter. I wasn't raised that way. It's not my bag. You'll hear people say, we stayed together, married folks, we stayed together. The problem today is these kids, they don't stay into the marriage. I have met so many broken people who are broken because, yes, their parents stayed together and they grew up in a house where a mom and a dad never spoke to each other. They'd sit there at this awkward breakfast table or this awkward dinner table, and mom would talk to the kids, dad would talk to the kids, parents would pass messages through the kids, even though they all live in the same house. I've heard stories about kids growing up in houses where the parents slept in separate rooms. I'm talking like I Love Lucy, but not just separate beds because it's a 1950s TV show, separate bedrooms. The parents had separate bedrooms. They grew up with that. You got people saying that the fact that people divorce is the reason why these young kids don't respect marriage. I think there's an equal level of support that the reason why some of them don't get married is they grew up in these crazy ass houses. It is completely possible, and we're not going to phrase it that way. I'm going to be more direct. You are physically compatible with this many people. I'm trying to do this for the camera here. There we go. You are physically compatible with this many people. You are relationally compatible with this many people. What does that mean? It is completely possible for you to be physically compatible with someone that doesn't respect who you are, that doesn't care who you are, that doesn't like your race. I know for a fact that men are capable of sleeping with women of races that they hate. White country boys in police officer uniforms can sit around all day talking about how worthless black people are, and they will go to a strip club and pay the black stripper. Men will talk about Latins and how they're stupid and how they're just subhuman, but they will marry a Latin woman. I have seen it. I have talked to them. I I had this one guy, Navy guy, went over to Japan, married a Japanese woman, went over to his house. He would talk at her like she was a dog. He didn't let her get a driver's license. She wasn't allowed to go out without his permission. She had no friends. He didn't bring her out. His marriage to an Asian woman was in no way, shape, form, or fashion a demonstration of his respecting Asian people. I know guys that have been married to people from other cultures for 15, 20, 25 years, don't speak a lick of the language, can't say one sentence to their mother in law or their father in law. Now, walk your own walk, live your life. My wife was from Ecuador. I couldn't imagine living with this woman for an extended period of my life and not knowing the language and the culture and claiming that I care about her. Couldn't imagine. I could imagine marrying a Latin woman and, you know, saying, I need someone to take care of my kids and keep this house clean. I'll be back when I'm back. I could see doing that. And if she tolerates it, I could see it working out for me. But no, I couldn't see claiming that I actually see her as a human being and I respect her and I care for her and treating her that way. I think it's Hellboy 2. Hellboy 2, there's his brother and sister. I think they're twins. And the way it's set up, when either of them got injured, the other one felt the same pain. So if one got cut in their hand, the other one would also get cut in their hand. They'd both bleed. When the relationship with my ex started degrading, keep in mind, I'd been teaching this group of men or leading this group of men. So what I got to see a lot of guys going through divorces and going through rough custody battles. And I got to just see what worked, what didn't work. I got to see guys try it every which way. So I had an idea of, if it happened to me, I know what works and what doesn't work. I know when to keep myself calm, cool. I just seen a lot of experiences and improper use there. I had a lot of examples laid out before me. And I had so many examples laid out before me, I was able to provide instruction to others. So fast forward, the relationship with my ex started degrading not oddly, once I told her I was getting remarried. And so now I'm going through that degradation of a co-parenting situation. And one of the things I quickly realized and decided was no matter what happens, I won't be using these children as a weapon. Because that's what you often see. People start using children as a weapon. Because what I realized is every time a parent cuts the other parent, you're cutting the children. So one, I did not want to use the children as a weapon, but two, because okay, so I skipped a little bit. So I don't want to use the children as a weapon. Why don't I want to use the children as a weapon? Because using the children as a weapon against their own parent hurts the child. So my main concern was I don't want to hurt the child. It wasn't that I don't want to hurt my ex. A fight's a fight, but I don't want to hurt my children. So if my priority is to not hurt my kids, I had to go a step further. I actually can't hurt her. Because if I'm out in public dogging her out, someone's going to go back to those kids and say, I heard your dad talking about your mom, and she is this. I've cut them just the way I cut her. Please believe, as a human, I would love nothing more than to out my ex for everything I claim she is. But I have to decide my priority. And my priority is them above her. So she gets a walk. Even when she doesn't serve me back that same respect. So this is not conditional. This is not an agreement of reciprocity. She can do whatever she has been doing and she can continue that. I have to hold my line. Do what I got to do to not cut them. When you see parents doing things like this, these are people who have a personal thing going on. To be a white woman who's had a child with a black man and to be sharing these type of things when you got that kid living in the house, I don't care if they're not allowed to see your computer screen. This emanates out of your heart and soul. And because you're hurting, you are willing to cut. Because why would you post this? Think about why you post things. You have a social circle. So quite often, this is about stinging somebody. A person who posts this, because it's not truth, why do you post lies? You post it to sting people. So even if it's not to go directly at the ex, You're posting it to go at his community. So when you cut his community, you cut your own child. There's a term assigned to Donald Trump and his movement. It's called sadopopulism. I want to say that again. Sadopopulism. I just wrote that there in the chat thread. Sadopopulism is where people are willing to hurt themselves, provided they can be convinced that it will hurt someone else even more. A white woman with a biracial child who does this, who posts this, is basically saying, I'm a sadopopulist and I'm willing to hurt my own blood, provided I can be convinced it hurts that community or my ex even more. So whether their beef is with their ex and or the black community, they are saying, I am willing to cut my child's arm. I'm willing to cut the inside of my child's arm, possibly hitting a nerve. I'm willing to cut my kid. If you tell me it results in 2 cuts on the black community, if you convince me it results in 3 cuts on my ex, that is sadopopulism. You're willing to destroy yourself to a certain degree if you can be convinced it will destroy someone else a little bit more. That's the only justification, pathology for such behavior. It did not end well with my ex. You are never going to catch me running around talking about why all white people are evil. So I'm sharing this because it needs to be shared. That is a form of sadopopulism. But that is not the only form of sadopopulism out there. We need the community knowledgeable about such things and concepts, able to recognize it and engaging it. Start saying that. First off, you got to see it. Then you got to say it. See something, say something. See something, say something. When you see someone who fits what I just described, when you see someone that you know as a biracial child pushing this stuff out, and I'll even go further. When you see that white couple who adopted some black kids and they're putting this stuff out, see it, say it. Start with the question. Let me get this straight. You adopted 2 black kids. You feed them, you clothe them physically. But you are willing to harm them, to starve them spiritually, just so you can do what with this meme? To do what with this message? To take a dig at the black community? To take a dig at a type of black culture you think is inappropriate or wrong? You're willing to cut at your kids, adopted or biracial, yours. You're willing to cut down your own children for the chance it may be hurting a group more. That's how you live. Sadopopulism. Learn the word, learn to recognize it, and say something. Say something. Because coming back to those kids, they're sponges. So they'll notice if when their parents post memes like this or talk this way, they'll notice that the world reacts a certain way. They'll notice their parents complaining about how they can't speak their mind in public because the world doesn't approve. They'll notice. Influence is influence. Become aware of your effect. If you don't say something, the safe assumption about you is that it's your culture, whatever is being spoken. If you see this type of a meme and you don't ask why are they doing it, I'm going to make the assumption that you didn't question it because it's your culture. That's going to tie us into our um, final little section 3 here. So if you follow us, we started with um, section 1 of 5 minutes of fame. What are you going to do? You prepare for the fight before the fight. The majority of the fight is decided before you even get in the ring. We then went here using this example of people posting things like this but having biracial children as an example of sadopopulism. People who are willing to hurt themselves provided they could hurt someone else, or provided they're being told they'll be able to hurt someone else a little bit more than it will hurt them. Then finally, we're going to jump into the definition of work. The definition of work, let's go ahead and do this together. Is force times distance. Definition of work. Ah, that's funny. Physics. It actually gave me the definition of work. uh, let's go with a pretty one here. Here we go. Let's see if that blows up for us. No, I was trying to blow up this. Oh, there we go. Look at the top there. Work equals force times. They say displacement. They're just trying to be fancy. They're being bougie. That's just distance. Work equals force times distance. Very often in nonprofits and community organization groups, you'll find a certain type of person or even organization where you find them doing a lot of talking about their efforts, the force. This stems usually from an initial misplacement of what they should be getting out of their work. These are usually people who, because of the work they do, they want credit for it. They feel the community owes them something. They're not doing the work for the sake of the fruits. They're doing the work for getting something back for them. So that's where they go. They start off wrong. I'm to the point now where I walk in the rooms and you can tell that you can tell it's being ran by community people who are not there for the cause. Yes, they work in the cause, but they are not there for the cause. They are not working for the sake of the work. They're working for the sake of their personal fame or clout. I walk out. I walk out. If you ever see me at a community organization event and I walk out in the middle, this is majority of the time the reason. People who are not there for the work, they're there to do the work so they can get something out of it themselves. Sure, they might not be getting paid money, but they're there for a payoff for themselves. When you have too many people like that in the room and they're controlling the room, it's time to walk out. And the reason why I walk out is because no actual work can be done because they're focusing on their force. They're focusing on their efforts, their personal efforts, and it's about them. I did this, so I want this. Well, what that means is they could do a whole bunch of effort, but it doesn't actually move the wall, and they will feel that they're still owed. There's between an employee and a partner. A partner, you guys can work 90-hour weeks for 4 weeks straight. And if the bank account is empty, a partner is not going to ask for a check from himself or herself. The money's not there. An employee, I've had this happen, an employee will show up 2 hours late to their shift. Let's say they work in the kitchen. They'll show up 2 hours late to their shift. They will break half the dishes in the kitchen, damn near poison half your customers, and still hold their hand out saying, hey, can I get an advance on my check? They don't care if they scared off customers and they lost customers. They don't care about the work produced. They don't care about if they moved, had displacement. I put out effort. I showed up. I moved some dishes around. Who cares if they went from one dish to little dishettes? I want my check. And they would say that to me. I want my check. There are people who are like, it's just super slow. And you're like, you know what? Been here for 4 hours. It's been raining like cats and dogs outside. Ain't no one coming in. I'm going to go ahead and just cut you. And they're mad. It's not my fault it's rained. I was on a schedule for 8 hours. I want my check. Even if you send me home, you should pay me. You have the same thing in community organizations where even though they haven't actually moved the needle for their community, even though they haven't actually done anything effective, even though they haven't accomplished anything, they want credit for the effort. I showed up to every meeting. We're about the community. We have these rallies. Okay, great. Well, what's the outcome of the rallies? And they get mad at you for asking such a question. What's the outcome of the rally? Did you sway some politicians? Did you help write some legislation? Did you get some people enrolled in voting? That's why I like the ones I see where they do it and they start signing people up to vote. Okay, that is work. You put some effort out, but the force, the distance, the distance is there's now, even only one person signed up, there's now one more voter on the voter rolls than there was yesterday. You did work. Other guys, we played some music in the park. Okay. So what does that produce? Man, we did it for the people. I don't know what that means. What did you do? What's the work? Man, the kids love it. Great. But these kids are become adults. What have you done to change the outcome of the world that they're going to grow as an adult into? Don't get me wrong. Music, hot dogs, backpacks. Hot dogs are food. Need a backpack for school. So I'm not saying these things are nothing. The same way I'm not saying intentions and efforts are not nothing. But you should be able to communicate which wall are you trying to move or which box are you trying to move. I can push against a box all day long, but let's say the box is 5,000 pounds. I'm not strong enough to move it. So even though you can see me straining and grunting, I'm putting in force, but I'm not putting in enough force to move the box. So I've done no work. Before you walk out your front door talking about you're doing something for this community, any community, you should be able to describe the box you're pushing against, and you should be able to articulate how far you've moved it. Now, the great thing is, life has got so many variables. You can decide the box. So even that same guy playing music out in the park, he can say, the box is, in this neighborhood, there's not enough positive public events. In my neighborhood, the only time everyone comes out of their house and comes together is when someone's laying on the ground cold and dead. I don't want that for the children in this neighborhood. So I'm going to do these music events so that last year we did no music events in the street. So every time the people who live on this street came out and met, it was to look at one of the 7 bodies that were laying in the street. My goal is to have 52 public music events. So the kids normally come out for good things. I know there's families like that where they say, only time we meet is for weddings and funerals. We should meet more often. We should get together more often. So I'm not saying if you don't pass legislation, you're not doing anything. I'm saying it's on you. It's on you to articulate which box you're pushing against and how far have you moved it. I see your writing here, William. There are some things I can see. Um, you're skirting a line there that I definitely want to engage with you on economics. And maybe what we can do is set up a show on community economics. So, just to recap for tonight, we talked about your 5 minutes of fame or 5 minutes in the fight, how the fight's decided before you get in the ring. So, train, practice how you don't wait for your city to burn. Start getting your embassy and your community together. So, if the world comes to talk to us, what are we about? What are we going to say? Get your team together. Figure out what's your message and stay on that message. Um, be a 4-year-old. You ever talk to a 4-year-old? What did you talk about when you talked to a 4-year-old? The answer is whatever the hell they wanted to talk about. No matter how you try to change the subject with a 4-year-old, it goes back to what they want to talk about. Be a 4-year-old when those cameras come to town. Know what you care about and talk about that. Satal populism. People who are willing to hurt themselves or their own because they think it might hurt someone else even more. Learn to recognize it, identify it, and say something. And then finally, the definition of work. Community work. It's not enough to force it. It's not enough to put effort in. Be able to describe which box we're talking about and how far it moved. Now, why do I say which box? Let's say the goal is to move a box from north to south. And you have moved the box 50 miles from east to west. As far as what we care about, north to south, you've done no work in that direction. Yes, you've moved it east to west. And if we cared about that, we'd say you moved it 50 miles. It has this weight. We could figure out the amount of work you accomplished. But the direction we care about, you didn't do any work. So let's bring that back less abstract. If the goal is to affect legislation and you handed out some backpacks, you did no work. If the goal is to make sure that every kid goes to school with the proper school supplies they need, And you got a politician to agree to put body cams into the budget next year. You've done no work because our goal is about the kids and being able to go to school well prepared. See what I'm saying? It's what angle are we looking at for work? You know, a plane, unlike a car, has three dimensions. Um, I'm not a pilot, so let's see if I jack this up. Roll, pitch, and yaw. When we're navigating our community, I argue it probably has 20, 30 of these dimensions. A plane has three. Moving through space, you have three: roll, pitch, yaw. Get together with your community. Write all the different things you care about. Each one of those is a dimension. Know all the dimensions that your community is aware of and concerned with, and be tracking them all. And start having those questions. What work are we doing in these X number of dimensions? So, yeah, I think that's the next step. List out the dimensions of, the dimensions of your community, and then start tracking what direction, what work is being accomplished in all of those individual dimensions. Ray Roberts, thanks for listening tonight, and be easy.